And so it's quite fascinating.
So you're saying that of the languages here in Ghana, the Ghana language was one of the first to actually
One
be
of the
written?
first. One of the first.
Is this 19th century? Is this 18th century?
Oh, you are talking about the 18th century, 1747.
1747. Wow.
Yes. The first ever manuscript, Proton. Proton had a Danish father and a grandmother. The documents that we have, he's the first ever to have used the Danish rules of spelling and orthography to write the Ghana language. And I have a copy of the manuscript. He calls himself Niteko Blofunyo. Blofunyo B. That's how he calls
Niteko Blofunyo B.
1747. And you have the document. So as far back as the middle 18th century, they have started writing the Ghana language by Danish explorers, Danish merchants, Danish governors.
So this is even before the missionaries?
Oh, long before the missionaries.
Because we typically tend to see a lot of our language developed through the work of the mission.
Yes. But Danish, because they were occupying the castle, the castle is not too far from us at Osu. So I've seen documents, by governors who were doing translation of the scriptures. Apostles' Creed, a little of this, a little of that. Quite a lot of these have been preserved in Copenhagen. So you have these documents, particularly those ones that were worked on by Christian Proton. And we have his diaries yet to be published.
So Noyaa Blofonyo was mixed race.
It's mixed race.
So he could speak both Ghana and Danish.
Yes. For him to be able to write. But that is the time of the merchants, the explorers. You have people like F.L. Roma, who were merchants, who worked, in Osu and its environs. You also have other explorers who worked, and they although they didn't write in Ghana at the time, if you look at their books, it's interspersed with Ghana words. So you could easily follow up. Ghana expressions, are littered all through. But it was during the time of the Basel Mission that the language really got, moving. There's a Danish factor. But even before there is this gentleman I did some work on. He's A.W. Hansen, Reverend Augustus William Hansen. Now he is supposed to have mixed parentage, a British father and a Ghana mother. And he was the first ever to have done a translation of the Bible into two books, John and Matthew, 7 years before Zimmerman. It was published by the British and Foreign Bible Society, and it was in circulation.
7 years before the great Johannes Zimmerman. Wow.
And, so Hansen, belongs to the Hansen family in Accra, and a very phenomenal person. Very little is known.
He translated the book of Matthew and the book of John into Ghana.
I have copies of Matthew and John as translated by A.W. Hansen. And when they were coming to the Gold Coast, Zimmerman was aware of these books because they were translated, they were worked on by the BFBS. So they wrote to him, and we have letters that they exchanged. They were looking for other manuscripts that he did, other translations, because he intended translating the whole Bible. Somehow, he mixed his way. I wouldn't say he mixed his way. Eventually, he ended up in Sierra Leone. He died very early. He joined the anti-slavery movement in Sierra Leone, and he died during one of the rescue missions. But the family, acknowledge him. Yeah, he did this phenomenal work before Zimmerman, and the collaborators. They are actually Ghana collaborators who worked hand in hand with Zimmerman.
It will be interesting to see those manuscripts and see the type of Ghana they were speaking and eventually writing. I'm saying this because I was handed a Ghana dictionary written by Zimmerman. And trust me, some of the words have changed, and some of the letters and the way they were even written don't resemble what we use today. So, so is there a sense in which the the translator or the person who codifies the language sort of tilts it to fit his own rules. So, for example, Zimmerman, he's from the Basel mission, and he's, I don't know if it's German or Swiss, it's German. So you'd expect that there will be a German slant to how he organizes the language, because even though he came to learn it, it's not his original language, and so he probably use because there are, for example, there are letters in German that you will see in Ghana you will not see in English. So talk to me a bit about how the influence of the person who arranges the language then sort of influences and determines the way we use the language formally.
I think that by the time Zimmerman came, there was this standard orthography called Lepsius, the Lepsius, standard orthography, which had been accepted and which was being used. Before then, they were using the Danish, as I said, orthography and rules of spellings. But then, at the time that Zimmerman came, language had really developed. So they were using the Lepsius, standard orthography. And so that's what Zimmerman and his people used. The orthography is there. But as to what they work on and then what they collect, what they choose to work on, I think is a very important question you are asking, because part of their documentation. And this is where Zimmerman did something phenomenal. Zimmerman and his class of Dietrich Westermann, who worked on the Ewe language, and then also Akrofi-Christaller, who worked on the Akan language. They went beyond just Bible translation. They developed grammars, grammar books in Twi Gan Ewe. Then they started writing primers, to be used in the schools, So that was a great period where the language was flowering, if you like. So they went beyond, and they were even collecting proverbs. So if you look at Zimmerman's, dictionary, the Accra dictionary, it has about 202 proverbs, Gan proverbs that he collected. Christaller collected 3,600 Twi proverbs. Dr. Dankwa, commented on it. So they were now moving beyond just Bible translation into the effective use of the language. Language as, if you like, a medium by which you can engage in critical thought. So beyond 1858, when the first grammar book was actually done by Zimmerman, and Bible translation followed. And by the way, the Ghana Bible happened to be the first ever to be translated, among all the books.
Of all our languages, the Ghana Bible is the first
to be translated into.
Which year is this?
This is 1866. In fact, we did the celebration 150 years, 2006, by the Bible Society.
So the Ghana Bible is a class prefect of all the...
Oh, yes.
The Ghana Bibles.
Because they think Akan is dominant, people think the Akan Bible is 1871.
Then it's fair to say Ghans became more literate than other groups earlier.
Oh, sure.
Because if they are, of course, the other publications, but the Bible because of the influence. So then Ghans became more literate in the then Gold Coast.
In the language, in the use of the language, and
earlier in their own language.
Their own language, and I brought this book with me. I wanted to show you because apart from grammar books, they were also developing other disciplines. So it wasn't only, if you like, Bible translation, grammar, and all that, but they were thinking about the disciplines. And these are the Germans, remember. Martin Luther had actually broken the jinx around Latin, so they know they could use their language as a language of thought. So other disciplines were being developed. So they were teaching our people that you could actually do maths in the various languages. And this is a book in Ghana, Akontabu. And this is 1876.
Wow.
This is 1876. And it's not that there was an English maths book which was being translated into Ghana. No.
Original.
So this is they were thinking about the concept, yes. So you have square roots, that
is square root.
That's cube roots. They were thinking about compound interest. If you can think in the language, then you can conceptualize in the language. So this was in 1876. And you have one in Ewe. You know, these are in 4 parts. Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4.
So like the numbers have their ekome, inyo, iten, and those things are all originally Ga. They didn't just translate an English text into this.
Yes. Remember, these are Germans. This is Zerwek. I mean, the person who did this, Zerwek is German. And there was no love lost between the English and then the Germans. They wouldn't do anything in English. You know, we've come with English for a very long time. We think, you know, but these were promoted by Germans. Unfortunately, these experiments came to a halt because of the war, the First World War, when the German missionaries had to leave. Yes. So you could do mathematics, you know, in the language.
You know, I'm sure that educators and the arguments about first language of instruction would need this book.
Oh, yes.
This is the Heritage Honors series. We're talking to Reverend Prof.Phillip Laryea. And all we're trying to do is to tell you who the Gans are. We started by talking about the name, of course, the fact that your father is Gan means you are Gan. But we are really focusing on the language. And it turns out that the Gan language is the first of the Ghanaian languages to be written. And the Gan Bible is the first written text. We've also learned about our Ni Ayite Blofonyo and some of the work he did, as we have about Zimmerman. So, but it's very clear that the Gan language development was massively enhanced by the Basil Mission.
The Basil Mission, sure.
And the role of the church has been very key, which is interesting because the Gan traditional religion is not Christianity. We have the Wulome. How did the Basil people's role in codifying the language, did it change anything? Did it influence anything? I don't know if you've studied that. Because if you are, we are not, Gans are not necessarily Christians. Okay, we are traditional worshippers. And then this missionary understands that language is very important to you. So he wants to learn your language and then he translates the Bible into your language. Somehow he will use the language to also Christianize you.
Yes, yes. You know, very interesting. And that is a thing Bible translators tell us, especially in Africa. Bible translators will tell you that to the extent that a Bible, you know, has a lot of loan words in it, then you have a problem. I think the greatest contribution is through Bible translation, because they used the words that were already there. They didn't manufacture terms. If you read the Ghana Bible, Ewe Bible, Tree Bible, I'm more conversant with the Tree Bible and then the Ghana Bible, most of the words, and I've worked on quite a number of the terms, let's say about 80% of the words are pre-existent. They borrowed them.
So you are saying that the concept existed among the people. So for example, the concept of God.
Yes,
Nyongmo.
That's the name.
But hold on, Christianity has many names for God. There's Jehovah, there's the Almighty, and then there's all these other El Shaddai and these things. Obviously, some of them you can't translate into Ga. So Yehovah is obviously Jehovah, a borrowed word from Yehovah, because the original Ga idea of the deity is Nyongmo. So that would be God.
Yes, that was.
But would that mean the same thing as what the Aramaic or the Greek writer of a Bible had in mind?
That is the deep theological question. Because see, if you read Acts, when Paul went, you know, among the Lystrans, he said, God has never left himself without any witness among all people. Obviously, he left his footprints. I mean, that's what I believed. He left his mark. He left his name. Otherwise, he